For most of human history, connection was synonymous with proximity. The very act of connecting required physical presence. Whether it was gathering in the warmth of a village square, working side by side in a bustling factory, or sitting around a fire to share stories, being together was a fundamental part of what it meant to be human. We communicated through touch, voice, and gaze, forming bonds that were immediate and tangible. The rhythms of life were slow, measured by the cycles of nature and the ebb and flow of human interactions. In that world, connection was a visceral experience, felt deeply in the body and mind. But over the course of just a few decades, something remarkable happened, something that fundamentally reshaped the way we connected. We invented ways to reach each other without needing to be in the same room, the same city, or even the same country. The hum of fax machines gave way to the click of emails, and the once novel concept of social media blossomed into a pervasive force. The world, once bound by physical boundaries, became smaller, and the digital age, marking an era of constant connectivity, began to take shape. We could now speak across continents in real time, see each other through screens, and share our thoughts and lives instantly with anyone who had access to the same network. The idea of connection was no longer just about being close, it was about being anywhere, anytime. This was the promise of the digital age, a revolution in how humans interacted, worked, and understood one another. But in our quest for connection, something was lost along the way. The convenience of emails, texts, and social media did not come without its cost. The very tools that were supposed to bring us closer together began to create a distance, a barrier between us. We could talk to anyone at any time, but more and more, we found ourselves speaking to people who weren't physically there, losing the warmth of a handshake, the depth of eye contact, the subtle nuances of voice and body language. Communication became efficient, quick, and impersonal. We sent a message, but the message was often devoid of the human touch that defined past interactions. The shift was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. Early on, the internet and email felt like extensions of the communication we had always known. We were still sharing information, but now it was happening faster and more efficiently. Soon, however, the digital tools that were meant to connect us began to replace our physical interactions altogether. It wasn't just the speed of communication that changed, it was the quality of it. Relationships were now mediated by screens, and the more we embraced these digital tools, the more isolated we became. The virtual world was always just a click away, offering endless streams of information, entertainment, and connection. But what was often lost was the grounding in the physical world that had once anchored us. Take social media, for example. Initially, it was heralded as a way to connect with long-lost friends, share experiences, and bridge the gaps created by distance. People were reunited with old acquaintances. Families could stay in touch across vast geographical distances, and strangers with common interests found like-minded communities in a world that suddenly seemed much smaller. But over time, the promise of social media became complicated. What was once an intimate space for sharing moments of our lives began to feel like a curated performance. The need for validation, the constant pursuit of likes, the pressure to present a picture-perfect version of our lives, all became part of the experience. And while social media enabled connections, it often did so at the cost of genuine human interaction. Behind the screens, people were increasingly lonely. yearning for something deeper than a like or a comment. The contrast was striking. We were more connected than ever before, yet in many ways we were more isolated. Our phones buzzed with notifications from friends and colleagues, but how often were we truly present with them, in the same room, in the same moment? How many meaningful conversations were sacrificed in favor of quick texts or social media updates? How many times did we scroll through our feeds, only to feel disconnected, as though we were watching life happen to others rather than participating in it ourselves? The rapid advancement of technology didn't just change how we communicated, it transformed how we worked. The rise of the digital workplace was one of the most significant shifts of the past few decades. Once, work was something that happened in specific locations, offices, factories, shops, places where people gathered to do their jobs together. But the advent of the internet, video conferencing, and cloud computing redefined work entirely. We could now work from anywhere, at any time. The traditional 9 to 5 schedule became more fluid, and physical office spaces became optional. The flexibility was liberating for many, offering opportunities for remote work and a better work-life balance. But it also blurred the lines between personal time and professional time. The constant connection meant that work never truly ended. We were always available, always plugged in, always on call. The human need for downtime, for rest, became increasingly elusive as technology wrapped itself around every aspect of our lives. This was the price of progress, a world where we were always connected but often stretched too thin, juggling endless streams of information and demands. The tools we had created to simplify our lives had, in many ways, made them more complicated. The ability to work from anywhere was empowering, but it also created a culture where taking a break, truly disconnecting, seemed like a luxury. Our identities became tangled with our digital selves. The line between work and leisure blurred. Personal data was collected and sold, often without our knowledge or consent. We exchanged our privacy for convenience, for the endless apps and tools that promised to make life easier, only to realize that in the process, we were losing control of our most intimate details. The story of digital connection isn't just a story of technology. It's a story of us, the humans who built it and became intertwined with it. The rapid evolution of the digital world forced us to confront fundamental questions about who we are and what it means to be connected. It's a story of progress, yes, but also of pitfalls. For every advancement, there seemed to be a new challenge. With every step forward, we faced unforeseen consequences, from the erosion of privacy to the rise of misinformation. Technology, once heralded as the great equalizer, began to highlight the inequalities that still existed in society, those who had access to the digital tools and those who didn't. As technology continued to shape our lives, we were forced to ask, what is the cost of connection, and what do we lose in the process? Yet, as much as technology has changed the world, it is ultimately shaped by human hands. The choices we make, the values we hold, and the way we use these tools will determine how the story unfolds. It's not enough to simply innovate. We must also ensure that these innovations are serving us, that they're not taking away what is most essential to our humanity, our ability to connect meaningfully, to build relationships, to understand each other. As the digital world continues to expand, we must also ask ourselves how we can use it to foster a deeper connection, rather than allowing it to drive us further apart. We live in a time of incredible technological progress, but it's also a time of reckoning. The digital age is both a marvel and a challenge. The same tools that allow us to connect and create, to share and collaborate, also have the power to isolate us, to strip us of our privacy, and to blur the lines between reality and simulation. As we move forward, we must be mindful of the delicate balance between progress and preservation. The future of connection is not just about how far technology can take us, it's about how we ensure that, in the process, we don't lose what makes us human. It was 1983, and the world was on the brink of a monumental transformation. The winds of change were whispering through the corridors of technology, slowly but surely reshaping the very fabric of how humans would connect. At this juncture, the old ways of communicating, letters, landline phones, and the revolutionary fax machines were still very much in use. The fax machine, with its curious whirring sounds and the ability to send a document halfway across the world in a matter of minutes, had been the crown jewel of communication in the modern age. It was efficient, sure, but it was still grounded in the physical world, tethered to machines and lines, its reach limited by technology's still evolving grasp. But in 1983, something was about to emerge that would render all of that obsolete. It would change the world forever. It would change the way people communicated, not only across cities or countries, but across the globe itself. It was the advent of email. The story of that first email is nearly mythical now. Ray Tomlinson, a computer scientist, sent what we now know to be the first email. It was a simple string of characters, QWERTY. At the time, it was a meaningless sequence of letters, just a test to see if the system he had been developing worked. But the implications of that moment were far from trivial. Email, in its most primitive form, was born, and with it, a new era of communication was on the horizon. The first email didn't change the world overnight, nor was the message itself of any great consequence. What mattered was the technology that made it possible. The ability to send messages instantly across vast distances with just a few keystrokes. It wasn't about the message, it was about the medium. Email had the power to connect people in ways that had been previously unimaginable. What once took days, sometimes weeks, to communicate could now be sent in seconds. Before email, people still relied heavily on traditional methods of communication. Letters, while intimate and personal, often took days, if not weeks, to reach their destination. Long-distance phone calls were expensive and usually reserved for special occasions or urgent matters. Even the fax machine, the closest thing to instantaneous communication at the time, required the sender and receiver to be near the machine at the same time. It was all still so physical, bound by wires, postage, and the need for people to be in the same place at the same time. The email, however, promised to change all that, offering the kind of immediacy that business people, families, and friends alike would soon come to rely on. Yet, even as the possibilities seemed boundless, there was an undercurrent of unease. For all the excitement surrounding this new mode of communication, there was a subtle, almost imperceptible loss occurring in the background. In our quest for speed, efficiency, and convenience, we were starting to sacrifice the personal touch that once defined how we connected with each other. Emails, while fast and efficient, lacked the warmth and humanity that had been part of letters, those tactile, carefully considered missives that had once carried so much meaning. For those who had grown up in an era when writing letters was a common and cherished activity, the new digital age felt like a necessary but painful trade-off. Email was efficient, yes, but the magic of receiving a handwritten letter, the anticipation of tearing open an envelope to read the words someone had penned for you with their own hand, was fading. Now, we were left with a screen, a blinking cursor, and the distant hum of a modem as our new companions. The waiting was shorter, the communication more direct, but something intangible was beginning to slip away. But the world moved quickly, and as with all new technologies, the promise of email became too powerful to ignore. Businesses, seeing the potential to streamline communication, eagerly adopted the technology. The office that once buzzed with the hum of photocopiers and fax machines soon found itself filled with the click-clack of keyboards as workers typed out messages that were sent with the tap of a button, rather than the dialing of a number or the licking of an envelope. The modem's sound, a sequence of beeps and whirs, became the soundtrack of this new world. And suddenly, the globe felt smaller. Borders seemed to shrink, time zones less of an obstacle. Email was not just a tool for businesses, though. It became a way to bridge distances between families, connect long-lost friends, and even offer solace to those far from home. The immediacy of the digital message meant that no one was truly out of reach. With a few words, we could send comfort, share news, or simply remind someone that we cared. What once required physical travel, a letter, or a phone call, could now be accomplished with a few strokes of the keyboard. The possibilities seemed endless. No longer did we have to wait for the postman to bring us news or rely on expensive long-distance calls. Now, we could connect anytime, anywhere. However, with this newfound freedom came a paradox. The very thing that made email so powerful, the speed and efficiency, was also its weakness. There was no longer a need to meet face-to-face, to write a thoughtful letter, or to hear someone's voice over the phone. With email, we could send a message, receive a reply, and conduct business or maintain relationships without ever truly engaging with another human being. The art of letter writing, with its delicate craft of choosing the right words and waiting for a response, began to fade into nostalgia. The spontaneity and raw emotion that once defined personal communication were now being replaced with short, often impersonal messages, dictated by the need for expedience. Even as we traded the intimacy of handwritten letters for the convenience of the digital inbox, there was no denying the benefits that email brought with it. Families separated by oceans could now share their lives with each other in real time. Businesses could exchange ideas and documents at lightning speed, and information once confined to a select few was suddenly accessible to anyone with an internet connection. The flow of ideas, the exchange of knowledge, the sharing of culture, all of it was happening faster than ever before, on a scale that was once unimaginable. For all its drawbacks, email opened doors to an interconnected world that was growing more dependent on technology by the day. And while many of us lamented the decline of more traditional methods of communication, there was no denying that the world was now a smaller, more efficient place. No longer did we need to wait weeks for a letter to arrive, or spend precious time on the phone with someone across the country. We could send a message and have an answer in mere seconds. And as businesses began to operate on a global scale, email became the lifeblood of commerce. It was the tool that allowed ideas to flow, that connected companies, and that made the world feel smaller, more immediate. But as we stood on the precipice of this new digital age, there was still a question hanging in the air. How would we preserve the essence of human connection in a world that was becoming increasingly automated and distant? Would we, as a society, find a way to balance the speed and efficiency of digital communication with the warmth and empathy that had once been part of how we connected with each other? Or were we on the verge of losing something irreplaceable in our rush to embrace the future? It was, perhaps, the greatest challenge of this new era, the challenge of not allowing technology to strip us of the very thing that made us human. And as the first wave of email users continued to explore this new frontier, they couldn't help but wonder where this new path would lead. Would it ultimately bring us closer together? Or would we find ourselves more isolated than ever before, trapped in a world of digital messages with no face, no voice, and no real connection? The answers to these questions were not immediately clear. But what was certain was that the power to shape the future of communication lay in our hands. It was up to us to harness the benefits of email and technology while remaining mindful of the importance of genuine connection. As we navigated this evolving landscape, many began to explore innovative ways to infuse digital interactions with personal touches, whether through video calls that brought faces to voices or thoughtful emails that conveyed warmth and understanding. Communities and workplaces started to adapt, blending the old with the new. Face-to-face meetings were complemented by virtual gatherings that allowed participants from around the world to join in meaningful discussions. People shared digital photos and videos, adding visual depth to their stories, while emojis and GIFs became a new language of emotion, helping to convey tone and nuance in written messages. In education, teachers embraced online platforms that enabled interactive learning, while still valuing the irreplaceable experience of in-person teaching. Families, too, found ways to stay connected across distances, using technology to share milestones and everyday moments alike. Despite the digital noise, many discovered that the key lay in intentionality, choosing when to embrace the speed of email and when to slow down, to write a heartfelt message or make a call just to hear a loved one's voice. It was in these choices that the future of human connection would be forged, ensuring that even in an automated world, the warmth of humanity would always shine through. In the early days of email, the potential felt limitless, and the world seemed poised to take a giant leap forward. But it was still too early to know how this new communication tool would truly shape the future. What was clear, though, was that something profound had shifted. The way we communicated had changed forever, and there was no turning back. As the sound of the modem's beeps faded into the background, the new era of email was just beginning. What would the next chapter hold? Only time would tell. By 1991, the world had already begun to feel the ripple effects of the digital revolution. Communication, business, and personal interactions had evolved in ways unimaginable just a few years prior. The fax machine, once a marvel, had given way to the email, a faster, more efficient means of connecting people across vast distances. Yet, the digital age was only just beginning to unveil its true potential, and something far more profound was on the horizon. It wasn't merely a tool to send messages or exchange information. It was a transformation that would redefine the very way humans interacted with knowledge, with each other, and with the world itself. In 1991, Tim Berners-Lee, a British computer scientist working at CERN, introduced the World Wide Web, It was a creation that would change the course of human history. Before this, information was fragmented, scattered across books, papers, and hard drives, often difficult to access unless one knew exactly where to look. But with the web, Berners-Lee built something entirely new, a platform for the free exchange of knowledge. It wasn't just a place for sharing documents or academic papers. It was an interconnected universe of ideas, images, sounds, and videos, all available at the click of a button. The web was a digital landscape that stretched endlessly, where every corner contained something new to discover. The concept of a global village was no longer a far-off dream. It was becoming a reality. People who lived in remote corners of the earth could now connect to the same network, share ideas, and access information in ways that were previously reserved for those with the resources or privilege to do so. For the first time in history, the boundaries of geography were becoming irrelevant in the realm of information. A person in a small village in India could read the same news as someone in New York, watch the same educational videos, or browse the same research papers. The notion that anyone could access anything, anywhere, was exhilarating. It felt like the dawn of an entirely new era. In the blink of an eye, the web democratized information. The first websites, often simple pages with text and links, served as gateways to knowledge. Suddenly, the vast and intricate web of human knowledge that had once been locked behind gates of libraries, archives, and physical books was now open to all. It was like walking into a giant library where every book, article, and manuscript was available for anyone to explore anytime. And yet, despite its openness, there was a certain thrill, a sense of wonder, in discovering the web's hidden nooks and crannies. It wasn't just about accessing information, it was about exploring, about stepping into an unknown world and making it your own. But like all revolutions, the web's evolution came with unintended consequences. What began as a platform for sharing knowledge soon transformed into something far more complex. As more people logged on, more businesses, governments, and institutions began to stake their claims in this new digital world. The early websites that existed primarily as informational pages soon began to evolve into more dynamic entities with multimedia elements and interactive content that made the experience of navigating the web feel like a true adventure. This new frontier was no longer just about information. It was about experience, entertainment, commerce, and identity. With the growing interconnectedness, privacy became an issue. The web, in all its interconnected glory, was not without its flaws. The convenience of having vast amounts of information at our fingertips came with a price. Every search, every click, every purchase, each of these actions left behind a digital trail. What had once been private, our shopping habits, our interests, our personal details, was now exposed to the larger, invisible web of the internet. It wasn't just the companies we trusted with our information who had access to it. Now, with just a few keystrokes, anyone could potentially track our movements across the digital landscape. The idea of privacy, once an almost unspoken right, began to erode. As the web grew more expansive, this digital footprint became a fact of life. Personal information, once kept within the confines of our homes or private offices, was now being shared and collected at an unprecedented rate. While the World Wide Web connected people in ways never before possible, it also raised a host of new questions. Who owns this information? Who has access to it? What happens when this information is misused or stolen? These were questions that we had never had to ask in such an immediate way before, but now they were central to our online existence. The tension between connectivity and privacy sparked an ongoing debate about the ethical use of technology and the responsibility of those who wield it. As users, we found ourselves caught in a delicate balance between embracing innovation and protecting our personal sovereignty. Laws and regulations began to emerge, attempting to safeguard our digital rights. Yet they often lag behind the rapid pace of technological advancement. Amidst this backdrop, a new awareness began to take root among Internet users. People started to demand more transparency and control over their data. Movements advocating for digital rights gained momentum, calling for a more equitable and secure online environment. Tech companies, too, were prompted to reevaluate their practices, compelled by both public pressure and their own ethical considerations to place greater emphasis on user privacy and data protection. The evolution of the web also inspired a wave of creativity and empowerment. Individuals and communities harnessed the power of the Internet to share their voices, build networks, and drive social change. From grassroots campaigns to global movements, the web became a platform for activism and advocacy, amplifying the call for justice and equality across the globe. In this ever-changing landscape, the web continued to shape and be shaped by society. It stood as a testament to human ingenuity and the endless possibilities of connection, even as it challenged us to rethink how we navigate this digital frontier. As we moved forward, the lessons learned from the past informed our path, encouraging a future where technology serves humanity without compromising our core values. Meanwhile, the web was undergoing another transformation. Commerce, e-commerce, exploded onto the scene, forever altering the way people bought and sold goods. The days of physically traveling to a store, or even waiting for a catalog to arrive in the mail, were rapidly becoming a thing of the past. Instead, consumers could browse thousands of products, compare prices, and make purchases all from the comfort of their homes. This shift was profound, fundamentally changing industries, transforming supply chains, and opening up new avenues for entrepreneurs and small businesses to thrive. It wasn't just a new way of shopping, it was a new way of doing business, one that transcended borders and time zones. At the same time, the web began to foster new ways of forming relationships. Online communities, forums, and chat rooms allowed people to connect over shared interests, regardless of where they were in the world. Friendships were formed, conversations were sparked, and identities were forged in this new digital space. Social networks like Facebook, which would come later, began to take root, and the notion of maintaining relationships digitally became more normalized. Suddenly, distance no longer mattered. You could connect with anyone, anywhere, anytime, and share your thoughts, experiences, and photos in real time. But as much as the web connected us, it also began to create new tensions. The more we shared, the more we were exposed. The line between our online persona and our real-world selves began to blur. We were no longer simply communicating. We were constructing digital identities carefully curated, often fragmented versions of ourselves that could be shaped, edited, and manipulated. The more time we spent online, the more we became aware of the fact that these digital personas were often far from the full truth, and this raised new questions about authenticity. What was the cost of our online presence? Who were we, really? when stripped of our carefully constructed online identities. This era also saw the rise of digital literacy. As the web became more complex, navigating it effectively required new skills. The ability to critically assess information, to differentiate between credible sources and misinformation, became an essential skill in the digital age. Suddenly, the flood of information that once seemed so liberating became overwhelming. How could we tell what was true, what was trustworthy, and what was just noise? What made one website credible and another not? And as more and more people gained access to the web, the divide between those who were digitally literate and those who were not became more pronounced. For some, this new landscape was a confusing, intimidating place, one where they felt left behind. As these issues surfaced, the web continued to evolve. New technologies were developed to enhance our online experience. Faster internet speeds, better graphics, more interactive elements. We began to use the web for everything from shopping and banking to learning and socializing. With the advent of search engines, finding information became easier than ever before. No longer did we have to sift through pages of text. Now, a search query could bring us precisely what we needed in seconds. It was a world where every piece of knowledge was just a few clicks away. Yet, with this ease of access came new challenges. Privacy concerns emerged as personal data became a valuable commodity, often traded without the user's explicit consent. Social media platforms, while connecting people across the globe, also became arenas for the spread of misinformation and echo chambers that amplified biases. As algorithms shaped our online experiences, they also began to influence our perceptions and interactions with the world. In response, there was a growing movement towards digital education, emphasizing the importance of teaching people not just how to use technology, but how to use it wisely and responsibly. This included understanding digital footprints, recognizing the importance of digital ethics, and fostering a culture of respectful and informed online communication. Moreover, the conversation around digital accessibility gained momentum, highlighting the need for inclusive design that ensures everyone, regardless of ability or background, can participate fully in the digital world. As we embraced these challenges, we also began to redefine what it meant to be literate in the 21st century. It was a time of reflection and adjustment, as society grappled with the implications of a rapidly evolving digital landscape. With each innovation came the opportunity to create a more informed, connected, and equitable world. It was a reminder that as our tools and technologies continued to grow, so too must our understanding and stewardship of them. By the mid-1990s, the web was no longer just a tool, it was a revolution. It had altered industries, redefined communication, and transformed social dynamics. But more importantly, it had fundamentally changed us. It had shifted how we understood the world, how we related to one another, and how we interacted with information. And as we looked to the future, we couldn't help but wonder, what's next? What other unimaginable transformations would the web bring? And how would we adapt to this rapidly changing digital world? In those early days of the web, the future felt full of endless possibilities. But it also came with a growing sense of uncertainty. As we embraced this new digital landscape, we were forced to confront the ways in which technology was changing the very essence of our human experience. And so, the story of the web, its birth, its evolution, its potential, remains an ongoing saga, one that continues to shape the world we live in today. The late 1990 seconds felt like a fever dream. To those who were there, an era brimming with boundless optimism, fueled by the rapid expansion of the internet and the rise of a new digital economy. It was a time when anything seemed possible, when the world was on the cusp of something monumental, something that would change not just the way we lived, but the very structure of society itself. The dot-com boom was more than a financial trend. It was a cultural shift, an electric wave that washed over everything. Entrepreneurs were heralded as visionaries, while tech startups popped up like mushrooms after a spring rain, all promising to shape the future with the click of a button. In this brave new world, companies like Amazon, eBay, and Yahoo were born. The internet had become a playground, and these companies were the architects of a new world order, where the very fabric of commerce and communication would be rewoven in real time, entirely online. At the heart of it was a simple dream. The internet would be the foundation of an all-digital world. No longer would people need to leave their homes to shop. No longer would they be bound by geographical constraints when they needed information or entertainment. Everything was there, at your fingertips, available at any moment, your needs and desires met by a digital marketplace that stretched far beyond the confines of traditional business models. The internet was supposed to be the ultimate equalizer. It didn't matter where you lived, how much money you had, or who you knew. All that mattered was access and opportunity. The dream was intoxicating. A future where people could shop, work, play, and communicate without boundaries. The possibilities seemed endless, but the dream was fragile, and as quickly as it rose, it came crashing down. By the year 2000, the bubble burst, and the internet economy, which had been soaring to ever greater heights, began to unravel. Companies that had once seemed invincible, promising exponential growth, outlandish valuations, and a brave new world of commerce, collapsed under the weight of their own overconfidence. The dot-com bubble burst, sending shockwaves through the industry, causing billions of dollars in losses, and wiping out vast sums of wealth in what felt like an instant. For many, the crash was nothing short of catastrophic. Investors, who had once poured money into these ventures, with the hope of reaping unimaginable returns, found themselves holding the pieces of a shattered dream. For the companies that had been built on the promise of endless growth without the substance to back it up, the reality was even more brutal. Many of these startups, once hailed as the future, vanished, consumed by their own inflated valuations, poor planning, and the speculative nature of the internet's early days. The collapse was, in many ways, a wake-up call. The internet wasn't the perfect utopia that people had imagined. It wasn't invincible, nor was it immune to the same forces of economic reality that had shaped traditional industries. The dream of an all-digital world was dashed, replaced by a sense of uncertainty and disillusionment. For a moment, it seemed as if the future had slipped through our fingers, and with it, all the promises of a new economy built on the internet's boundless potential. Yet, even as the dust settled and the wreckage of failed ventures piled up, a new kind of optimism began to emerge. The collapse of the dot-com bubble was painful, yes, but it also proved to be a necessary correction. It forced those who remained to rethink the way they approached the digital economy. Instead of chasing lofty valuations and quick profits, the survivors of the crash, both companies and entrepreneurs, started to focus on what truly mattered: sustainable growth, real value creation, and a deep understanding of what users needed and wanted. They had learned the hard way that digital business models built solely on speculation and hype were unsustainable. Amidst the rubble, a new wave of innovation began to take shape. Some of the companies that had been left standing after the crash started to show what the internet was truly capable of when used responsibly and with long-term vision. One of the first and most obvious examples was Google. Founded in 1998 by Larry Page and Sergey Brin, Google had initially been a search engine designed to organize the world's information. But by the time the dot-com bubble burst, it was becoming clear that Google's true power lay in its ability to index and rank information in a way that made knowledge more accessible to everyone. The search engine was not only functional, but it was also deeply innovative. It didn't just return results, it returned the best results, making it easy for anyone to find what they were looking for. Google wasn't about hype or promises of overnight riches. It was about solving a real problem, connecting people with the information they sought. This commitment to delivering genuine value set Google apart and allowed it to thrive in the new landscape of the digital age. As Google continued to refine its algorithms and expand its services, it became a cornerstone of the internet, setting standards for how information should be organized and accessed. But Google wasn't alone in this renaissance. Other companies, too, began to emerge from the shadows of the crash, driven by a similar ethos of innovation grounded in practicality. Amazon, for example, had weathered the storm by focusing on customer experience and expanding its product offerings. Under the leadership of Jeff Bezos, Amazon transformed from an online bookstore into a global retail powerhouse, constantly innovating and investing in technology to streamline logistics and improve user satisfaction. Meanwhile, new players entered the scene with fresh perspectives and cutting-edge ideas. Social media platforms like Facebook, founded by Mark Zuckerberg in 2004, began to revolutionize the way people connected and shared information online, fostering communities and bridging gaps across the globe. These platforms understood that the real power of the internet lay in its ability to bring people together and facilitate communication in unprecedented ways. The lessons learned from the dot-com bubble had a profound impact on the tech industry, leading to a more mature and thoughtful approach to digital business. Entrepreneurs and investors alike became more discerning, seeking out ventures with solid foundations and sustainable business models. This new era of technology was not just about rapid growth and expansion. It was about building resilient companies that could withstand the tests of time and continue to innovate in meaningful ways. As this new chapter unfolded, it became evident that the true legacy of the dot-com bubble was not its failures, but the resilience and determination it inspired. The tech world had been given a second chance, and this time, it was ready to seize the opportunities with a renewed sense of purpose and vision. Then there was Apple. Although it wasn't born out of the dot-com boom, Apple's role in the tech landscape was about to undergo a profound transformation. Under the leadership of Steve Jobs, Apple began to reshape personal technology with products like the iPod, the iPhone, and the iMac, all of which were about more than just functionality. Apple products were about design, ease of use, and most importantly, creating an experience for the user. While many tech companies were still fixated on maximizing profits and scaling without truly considering their customers' needs, Apple had discovered that success lay in the intersection of great technology and great user experience. The company wasn't just selling products, it was selling an ecosystem, a lifestyle. By 2001, Apple had solidified its place as one of the leading tech giants of the era, with a loyal following and a new direction that emphasized innovation in a way few others had. This period also marked the beginning of a new philosophy in the tech world, a philosophy that emphasized ethical practices, user experience, and a sense of responsibility in the digital space. Companies began to realize that it wasn't enough to simply be online. They had to deliver real value, and they had to do so in a way that built trust with their users. The lessons of the dot-com crash had forced the industry to reconsider the way it approached growth and profitability. No longer was it enough to promise a utopia of digital ease and convenience. Instead, companies had to deliver tangible, meaningful results, and they had to do so in a way that would build a lasting relationship with their customers. As the years passed and the dust from the dot-com crash continued to settle, it became increasingly clear that the Internet's true potential had only just begun to unfold. What had initially seemed like a catastrophic failure had become the fertile ground for a new wave of innovation, one that would see the rise of social media platforms, mobile technology, and e-commerce on a scale previously unimaginable. The failures of the past had given birth to a new generation of entrepreneurs, innovators, and companies that understood the importance of balancing ambition with responsibility, growth with sustainability. By the early 2000s, the Internet was becoming more than just a tool for shopping or information. It was becoming a place to connect, to create, and to engage. New platforms emerged, new ideas flourished, and technology began to reshape the very way people interacted with the world around them. What the dot-com boom had promised, the dot-com bust had ultimately delivered: a more mature, more thoughtful digital world, one that was capable of great things but grounded in the realities of human needs and limitations. Looking back, it's clear that the dot-com era was both a cautionary tale and a moment of great opportunity. It demonstrated the dangers of unchecked speculation, of overblown promises, and of ignoring the fundamental needs of users. But it also showed the resilience of the tech industry and its ability to learn from failure. As the world embraced the lessons of the dot-com crash, a new digital ecosystem began to emerge, one that was more sustainable, more focused on real-world impact, and more in tune with the needs of its users. The Internet was no longer just a dream, it was a vital part of our daily lives, and its influence would only continue to grow. In the end, the dot-com dream wasn't lost. It had simply evolved. And as the Internet continued to grow and shape the future, it was clear that the next chapter of this digital revolution was just beginning. The journey from the crash to the creation of a new digital landscape was far from over, and its next chapter was already unfolding before our eyes. By the mid-2000s, something profound was stirring in the digital landscape, a force that would forever alter the way we communicated, connected, and experienced the world around us. Social media, in all its emergent forms, was beginning to take shape. The Internet, which had once been primarily a tool for information and commerce, was now transforming into a platform for personal expression, connection, and community building. Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, and YouTube, these platforms began to surge in popularity, offering people an entirely new way to interact with the world. The promise was simple but compelling. Social media would revolutionize human connection. At a time when traditional forms of communication, like email or phone calls, still felt disconnected and distant, social media allowed individuals to share their lives with the world. People could post photos, update their statuses, comment on each other's lives, and express their thoughts to a global audience in a way that had never before been possible. It was a new frontier of human interaction, a space where friends, family, and strangers alike could connect instantly, forming relationships and communities online, transcending geographical boundaries and time zones. In the early days, social media seemed like a utopia. No longer would we be confined to the limits of physical proximity to stay in touch with those we cared about. Distance and time no longer stood in our way. For the first time, you could interact with someone from across the globe, forging new friendships or reigniting old ones with the click of a button. The world, it seemed, had shrunk to the size of your screen. There was excitement in the air. Social media was going to change everything. It wasn't just about having a conversation anymore. It was about sharing our lives in a way that felt authentic, immediate, and raw. People had access to an unprecedented platform for self-expression, whether through words, images, or videos. Personal blogs turned into public diaries, and amateur filmmakers could showcase their talents to the world via YouTube. For those with creative visions, the possibilities seemed endless. The concept of online communities blossomed during this time. There were groups for everything. People who shared common interests, causes, or hobbies could find one another in digital spaces and unite in ways they had never been able to before. Facebook's Groups feature, MySpace's ability to personalize profiles, and Twitter's 140-character limit to broadcast thoughts made it easier to discover like-minded individuals and build communities. It was the democratization of connection, an egalitarian vision where anyone, from any background, could find a voice and be heard. The notion of a global village was no longer a distant ideal. It was unfolding in real time. But as with every revolution, there was a shadow lurking behind the promise of progress. By the time the late 2000s rolled around, the very platforms that had promised connection were revealing their darker sides. The simplicity and joy of connecting with others had been overtaken by complexity, with unforeseen consequences that many hadn't anticipated. For every positive story about online communities, there were just as many stories about division, manipulation, and the erosion of privacy. The lines between public and private began to blur, and the consequences were profound. The very tools that had brought people closer together were also beginning to tear them apart. Social media platforms, which had once fostered relationships and encouraged diverse conversations, became echo chambers, places where individuals sought out others who shared their beliefs, reinforcing their existing viewpoints and avoiding those with differing opinions. The promise of an interconnected world, where people could share experiences across cultural and ideological divides, was undermined by algorithms designed to cater to our biases. Instead of promoting understanding and empathy, the platforms began to amplify voices that thrived on outrage, division, and controversy. And this wasn't just a philosophical concern. Social media began to warp the way people viewed the world around them. With the constant bombardment of information, news, opinions, advertisements, and memes, it became increasingly difficult to discern truth from fiction. Fake news, misinformation, and rumors spread faster than ever, often inciting panic, or exacerbating political divides. The very thing that made social media powerful, the ability to share and consume information, also made it an ideal breeding ground for falsehoods and manipulation. One of the most profound changes came in how we viewed our own lives. Social media created an environment where self-presentation became a curated art form. Platforms like Instagram and Facebook encouraged users to post the best versions of their lives, perfectly framed photos, joyous moments, and filtered realities. For many, the pressure to maintain a seemingly perfect life became overwhelming. The social media highlight reel was often a far cry from the messy, complex reality of daily existence. But it created a culture where comparison was rampant. We began measuring our worth against the lives of others, and the constant need for validation through likes, comments, and shares became a driving force for many users. This obsession with self-presentation and validation didn't stop at individuals. Brands and companies quickly realized the power of social media to influence and engage with consumers. The rise of the social media influencer was one of the defining characteristics of this era. These individuals, with their vast followings and seemingly authentic connections to their audiences, held sway over public opinion, trends, and consumer behavior in ways that traditional advertising could never have matched. Brands scrambled to partner with these influencers, realizing that the power of recommendation from a peer, albeit a digitally constructed one, could lead to massive shifts in purchasing patterns. But this shift also led to a new form of commercialization. As companies scrambled to engage with social media's vast audience, they sought ways to monetize these platforms. The advertisements, the sponsored posts, the algorithms that decided what you saw in your feed, all of it was designed with profit in mind. And while this brought an influx of money into social media companies, it also introduced new ethical dilemmas. How much privacy were users willing to sacrifice in exchange for free access to these platforms? Was it okay for companies to profit off user data? The darker side of social media, its manipulation of user attention, its reliance on data, and its erosion of privacy became more apparent as the decade progressed. And yet, amid all the noise, there were still moments of genuine connection. The same platforms that fueled division also allowed people to find support and solace in ways they never could have before. For every story of cyberbullying or online harassment, there were just as many stories of individuals finding solidarity, comfort, and even life-changing support within digital communities. Social media groups and forums became lifelines for people struggling with everything from mental health issues to personal identity. Through shared experiences and empathetic exchanges, people who felt isolated or unheard found a place where they could belong, no matter where they were in the world. The rise of social media also had a profound impact on global politics and social movements. The internet had long been a tool for change, but social media provided an unprecedented platform for mobilization. From the Arab Spring to the election of Barack Obama, social media played an essential role in rallying support, spreading messages, and organizing protests. Platforms like Twitter and Facebook became the new tools for political discourse and activism, giving voice to the voiceless and shedding light on issues that may have otherwise gone unnoticed. As the decade drew to a close, it was clear that social media had become something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't just a trend or a passing phase, it was a fundamental shift in how we interacted with each other, how we viewed the world, and how we presented ourselves. The challenge, however, was clear. How could we harness the positive power of social media while mitigating its negative effects? The connections it facilitated were real, but so were the dangers it posed. The question of how to strike a balance between connection and division, between expression and exploitation, would become the defining challenge of the next era. In many ways, the social era had been a period of growing pains, a time when society began to understand the complexities of living in a hyper-connected world. The lessons learned during this time would reverberate for years to come, shaping not only the future of social media, but also the way humanity would engage with the digital world. It was a time of both promise and peril, and as we looked ahead, it was clear that the journey had only just begun. The future of connection was unfolding before our eyes, and only time would tell where it would lead. In 2007, the world was introduced to a device that would forever change the way we lived, worked, and interacted with the world around us. The iPhone, with its sleek design and revolutionary touchscreen interface, marked the dawn of a new era, the smartphone age. Gone were the days when a mobile phone was merely a tool for making calls and sending text messages. Now, it was a powerful, all-in-one device that could do almost anything: check emails, play music, browse the web, navigate through unfamiliar cities, and much more. In an instant, our relationship with technology shifted, and we found ourselves carrying a digital Swiss Army knife in our pockets. The impact was immediate and profound. No longer confined to a desk or a landline phone, we were now always connected. The world was at our fingertips. We could send messages, post photos, check our bank balances, and even monitor our health, all through a single device. The smartphone had become an essential tool, seamlessly integrated into our daily lives, empowering us to access information, communicate, and stay connected in ways that were once unimaginable. The convenience was unparalleled. No matter where we were, we had the power to do just about anything, and we began to rely on it in ways we had never relied on technology before. With the rise of smartphones, the lines between work and personal life began to blur. Emails, once something that could only be checked during work hours or from a desktop, were now available at all times. Business professionals, students, and even parents found themselves tethered to their phones, constantly checking notifications, replying to messages, and managing tasks throughout the day. The smartphone had, in many ways, become the center of our lives, a tool we couldn't imagine living without. At first, this constant connectivity felt like an advancement, a leap toward a more efficient, more organized world. But as the years went on, it became increasingly clear that the smartphone era came with its own set of challenges. The more we relied on these devices, the more our personal lives became entwined with the digital world. Every message, every email, every post we shared was data, personal data, often collected and used without our full awareness. As we shared more about ourselves online, our likes, our preferences, our locations, our lives became more public than ever before. What we ate, where we went, who we were with, and even what we thought about at any given moment were all available for the world to see. Social media platforms, once the thrilling new frontier for personal expression, became vast repositories of personal information. And that information wasn't just shared with friends and followers, it was being tracked, analyzed, and sold to advertisers, businesses, and organizations with the goal of shaping our behavior and influencing our decisions. With the smartphone's rise came the rise of big data, a phenomenon that raised new ethical concerns. Every swipe, every search, every click was recorded and analyzed by algorithms designed to personalize our experience. It was convenient, no doubt. We got recommendations for everything from restaurants to movies to shopping, but in doing so, we were sacrificing something deeply personal, our privacy. Every action we took online became a piece of data, a fragment of ourselves that was being used in ways we had little control over. It was the price of convenience. As we became more accustomed to these devices, we began to ask ourselves, what were we really losing in the process? The trade-off between convenience and privacy was becoming more apparent. We were constantly told that our data was valuable, but the question remained, valuable to whom? And at what cost? The more we used our smartphones, the more we were giving away pieces of ourselves that we never fully understood the implications of. Were we simply paying the price of free services? Or were we being exploited for something much bigger? The smartphone also began to have unintended consequences for our mental health. Social media, once a way to connect with friends and share experiences, became a constant source of comparison. The curated images of people's lives, highlighting only the best moments, created a sense of inadequacy in many users. Studies began to show that the more time people spent on social media, the more they struggled with feelings of loneliness and anxiety. The constant need for validation, the pressure to appear perfect, and the comparison to others started to take a toll on our well-being. Moreover, the very convenience that made smartphones so attractive, being constantly available, being always on, also meant that we were never truly disconnected. The boundaries between work and life, between personal time and digital obligations, began to erode. There was always a notification to check, an email to respond to, a message waiting. In many ways, the smartphone had become a tether, tying us to a digital world that was always demanding our attention, always asking us to stay connected. The ability to escape, to switch off, became increasingly rare. Social interactions also began to change in ways that were harder to ignore. The smartphone, while designed to connect us, also created new forms of disconnection. People in the same room, once engaged in face-to-face conversations, were now distracted by their phones. The term phubbing emerged, a term describing the act of snubbing someone in favor of your smartphone. It became more common to see people at dinner, in meetings, or at social gatherings, their eyes glued to their screens instead of engaging with the people around them. It was as if the digital world was always competing for our attention, often at the expense of the real world. Conversations became punctuated with pauses, interruptions, and distracted glances at the screen. This shift sparked debates about digital etiquette and the importance of being present in the moment. Alongside these challenges, the smartphone era gave birth to the gig economy, a transformative development in the world of work. Ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft, and food delivery apps like DoorDash and Postmates turned smartphones into gateways to new employment opportunities. These apps enabled people to work on their own schedules, offering flexibility and autonomy that traditional jobs often lacked. For many, these platforms became an attractive way to earn money, whether as a full-time job or a side hustle. However, this flexibility came with its own set of challenges. Workers in the gig economy often faced unstable incomes, a lack of benefits, and little job security. While these platforms opened up new possibilities for work, they also raised important questions about workers' rights and the future of employment. Despite these challenges, smartphones continued to be indispensable tools in our lives. They kept us connected, informed, and entertained. With a single device, we could stay up to date with the latest news, share our thoughts with the world, and connect with people across the globe. The smartphone had become a portal to the world, a tool that empowered us to access knowledge, engage with others, and navigate the complexities of modern life. As the years passed, smartphones evolved. They became more sophisticated, more integrated into our daily routines, and even more essential. New features were introduced: facial recognition, virtual assistants, augmented reality, making smartphones even more intuitive and powerful. The boundaries between the physical and digital worlds began to blur even further. Our phones became not just tools for communication, but extensions of ourselves, seamlessly woven into the fabric of our lives. But as we moved deeper into the smartphone age, the challenge remained. How do we harness the power of these devices responsibly? How do we use technology to enhance our human experiences without letting it erode our privacy, our well-being, and our relationships? It was a question that many of us were still grappling with as the smartphone continued to evolve and shape the way we interacted with the world around us. The story of the smartphone era was far from over, but the lessons we had learned so far were already clear. The key to a healthy relationship with technology lay in balance, finding a way to use the tools we had created without losing ourselves in the process. And so, as we moved further into the 21st century, we were faced with a simple truth. The power of the smartphone was undeniable, but how we wielded that power would define the future. Would we allow these devices to enrich our lives, or would we let them diminish the very things that made us human? Only time would tell. As the calendar flipped into the 2020 seconds, the world found itself on the precipice of yet another monumental shift, one that would transform society in ways both profound and unsettling. It was a time when artificial intelligence, or AI, was no longer merely a concept confined to science fiction. It was real. It was here. And it was beginning to shape our lives in ways we could scarcely comprehend. What started as a tool to streamline tasks and improve efficiency was rapidly evolving into something more, something that wasn't just assisting us, but understanding us. AI wasn't a distant, abstract entity anymore. It was an active participant in our daily lives, a silent partner helping us navigate the complexities of the modern world. The early days of AI were subtle, almost imperceptible. At first, it was chatbots answering customer service inquiries, or algorithms that suggested what movie to watch based on the last few you'd seen. We were, in many ways, still in control of the technology, using it to enhance our own capabilities and convenience. But as machine learning algorithms began to evolve, so did AI's ability to predict not just our preferences, but our behaviors. It wasn't long before these systems began to recognize patterns in us, patterns that sometimes even we didn't fully understand about ourselves. As we became more familiar with AI, we saw it expand beyond its initial uses. Voice assistants like Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant learned to anticipate our needs, ordering groceries, adjusting thermostats, setting reminders, and even controlling smart home devices, all through a simple voice command. These advancements didn't just make life easier. They created a sense of intimacy. For the first time, It felt as though technology wasn't just following our orders, it was beginning to understand us. It was personal. It was responsive. It was, in a sense, a reflection of our own desires and habits. Yet with this newfound capability came a growing unease. Was this a healthy relationship? Were we still the masters of our own destiny? Or had we created something that was beginning to subtly control us? The more we interacted with AI, the more it began to shape our decisions, influence our habits, and curate the experiences we encountered. The line between what was human and what was machine began to blur. It wasn't just that AI was facilitating our connection with the world, it was shaping how we saw the world. And in many cases, it was learning from us in ways we weren't fully prepared for. By 2025, it became clear that the evolution of AI was not merely about optimizing existing systems. It was about creating new forms of creativity, expression, and discovery. AI was no longer just a tool to assist us in mundane tasks. It was becoming an essential partner in the process of creation. In the arts, artists, musicians, and writers started collaborating with AI to push the boundaries of what was possible. Together, they ventured into uncharted creative territories, blending human intuition with machine precision to produce works of art, music, and literature that were once unimaginable. Musicians used AI to generate new melodies, while painters worked with algorithms to produce intricate, ever-evolving visual masterpieces. Writers co-authored novels with AI, exploring themes, styles, and stories that challenged the very notion of authorship. It was a renaissance, a time when the creative process itself was transformed by the fusion of human insight and artificial intelligence. This partnership between humans and machines wasn't confined to the world of art. Education, too, experienced a seismic shift as AI began to personalize learning. No longer did students have to learn at the pace set by a rigid curriculum. AI systems, capable of analyzing each learner's strengths and weaknesses, adapted content to suit individual needs. Whether you are struggling to grasp a concept or breezing through material, AI was there, offering tailored lessons that ensured every student could learn in the way that worked best for them. It was a breakthrough that promised to level the playing field in education, making learning more inclusive and accessible to people of all backgrounds, abilities, and ages. In healthcare, AI made its mark in ways that were both revolutionary and life-saving. Doctors, long the gatekeepers of medical knowledge, began to rely on AI systems that could diagnose diseases with unprecedented accuracy. Machine learning algorithms sifted through vast amounts of medical data, identifying patterns and symptoms that even the most experienced doctors might miss. AI-assisted diagnostics allowed for quicker and more accurate diagnoses, giving doctors the tools they needed to intervene early and improve patient outcomes. The result was not only faster treatments but also more personalized care, with AI adapting to the needs of each individual patient. It was a glimpse of the future, a world where technology didn't just treat disease but understood the patient as a whole. But while AI brought about these incredible advancements, it also came with its own set of challenges and ethical dilemmas. The question of privacy became more pressing than ever. We had long known that our data was valuable. But now, as AI systems learned from our every interaction, the depth of that value became apparent. Every click, every search, every purchase, these were no longer just actions they tracked. They were insights into our desires, our thoughts, our motivations. And while this data had the potential to improve services, products, and even healthcare. It also raised serious questions about surveillance and consent. Who controlled the data? Who had the right to access it, and for what purposes? AI also began to take on roles that had once been the sole province of humans' decision-making, problem-solving, and even emotional support. The rise of AI-powered personal assistants, chatbots, and virtual therapists gave us a glimpse of a future where our interactions with machines were no longer cold, calculated, or impersonal. These AI systems were designed to offer comfort, guidance, and understanding. But what did it mean when an algorithm became the one you turned to for advice, for empathy? Could a machine ever truly understand human emotions? Or was it simply mimicking human behavior based on data? And if we began to rely on machines for emotional support, what did that mean for the nature of human relationships? As AI continued to evolve, so too did concerns about the future of work. Automation, once a distant worry, had now become a reality for many industries. AI systems capable of learning, adapting, and performing complex tasks began to replace human workers in fields as diverse as manufacturing, logistics, and even finance. While automation brought efficiencies and reduced costs, it also raised serious questions about job displacement and the future of labor. For many workers, the fear of being replaced by machines was real, and it sparked intense debates about the future of employment, income inequality, and the role of human workers in an increasingly automated world. Amidst all this, society began to grapple with the implications of AI on a larger scale. The rise of machine learning algorithms, capable of predicting behaviors and making decisions with little human intervention, prompted questions about control and autonomy. Were we losing our ability to make independent choices? Or were we simply delegating our decision-making to machines that were more efficient, more precise, and more objective? As AI began to take over tasks that had once been reserved for humans, there was a growing awareness that the future of our relationship with technology was no longer about using tools, it was about coexisting with them. And perhaps the most profound shift came in how we viewed ourselves in relation to technology. In the past, humans had always defined their place in the world by their ability to create, to think, and to feel. But with AI now not only assisting us, but learning from us and evolving alongside us, we were forced to confront a new reality. We were no longer the only creators in the room. The machine, once a tool, had become a collaborator. It was no longer enough to simply interact with technology. It was now integral to the human experience itself. By the mid-2020s, it was clear that the age of AI was not just a technological revolution, it was a cultural, philosophical, and ethical shift. The way we connected with others, with the world around us, and with ourselves was being transformed. AI was no longer just a tool we used. It was shaping the way we understood the very nature of intelligence, creativity, and humanity. It was a brave new world, and we were learning to navigate it, not as passive recipients of technology, but as active participants in shaping the future we were co-creating with the machines we had brought to life. In this brave new world, one thing was clear. The future was not something that would happen to us. It was something we would actively shape, hand in hand with the intelligent systems we had created. The questions we asked today about AI would determine not only the course of technology, but the future of our own humanity. And as we stood on the precipice of this new era, we could only wonder what the next chapter would bring. Would we thrive in partnership with these intelligent systems, or would we lose something fundamental in the process? Only time would tell. As we entered the 2022nd, we stood at a moment of profound reflection. The world we had built, the hyper-connected digital ecosystem we had come to rely on, was no longer just a marvel of progress. It was also a maze of complexities, filled with shadows that we had failed to notice at first. It wasn't just about faster internet speeds, smarter gadgets, or the latest app to streamline our daily lives. No, it was about something far more fundamental: the cost of all this connectivity. What were we sacrificing, and how much of ourselves were we willing to give up in the process? The technological advances of the early 21st century had been thrilling. We were living in a time when the boundaries between the digital and physical worlds were rapidly disappearing. We could talk to people across the globe as if they were sitting right next to us. We could access nearly every piece of human knowledge with a tap of a finger. The convenience was undeniable. Yet, as the years passed, an unsettling truth began to emerge. The more connected we became, the less in control we seemed to be. And it wasn't just a matter of feeling overwhelmed by endless notifications or mindless scrolling through social media feeds. It was deeper than that. We were losing our sense of autonomy. The algorithms, the AI-driven systems, the carefully crafted digital personas, everything was shaping us, dictating what we saw, what we believed, what we thought. In the age of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and hyperconnectivity, we had created a world where technology didn't just serve us, it knew us. The devices we had invited into our lives were now learning from our every interaction, molding themselves to our habits, desires, and patterns. On one hand, this personalization made life incredibly easy. The apps we used seemed to anticipate our needs before we even realized them. Our social media feeds were curated to perfection, showing us what we wanted to see, reinforcing our beliefs, and keeping us engaged. But on the other hand, this same convenience came with a price. The more we relied on these technologies, the more we began to wonder, were we in control of our lives, or had we become passive participants in a world that was being shaped by the very systems we had created? We found ourselves at a tipping point, a pivotal moment where we had to confront the consequences of our choices. The question loomed large. Would we continue down the path of total digital immersion, allowing our lives to be completely orchestrated by algorithms and AI? Or could we find a way to use technology to enhance, rather than diminish, our humanity? This wasn't just a question for the tech-savvy elite or for digital ethicists. It was a question for everyone, every person who had embraced the promises of a connected world, only to realize that the lines between reality and the digital sphere were becoming dangerously blurred. This was a moment of reckoning. We had to decide whether we could retain control over our digital lives. Could we maintain our sense of self in a world where every action, every choice, was tracked, analyzed, and potentially manipulated by unseen forces? And if we could, how? Could we still use technology to connect with others, to share ideas, to empower ourselves, without losing the essence of who we were in the process? As we grappled with these questions, voices from all corners of society began to rise. Thought leaders, ethicists, technologists, and activists started advocating for a more mindful approach to technology, one that recognized the power of innovation but also acknowledged its potential to undermine the very things that made us human. The world was waking up to the fact that the digital age was not a utopia of infinite possibility, but a realm fraught with challenges that needed to be addressed head-on. Initiatives began to emerge, promoting digital literacy and helping individuals understand the deeper implications of their online lives. People were becoming more aware of how their data was being used, and slowly, they were demanding more control over it. They wanted to understand the algorithms that were shaping their world, and they were beginning to question the motives behind them. Digital literacy wasn't just about learning how to navigate the internet, it was about learning how to protect one's privacy, make informed decisions, and ultimately, take back control. In response, communities began to prioritize human interaction once again. As digital screens took over our attention, there was a growing movement to step away from the devices, to reintroduce face-to-face conversations, and to nurture the art of genuine connection. Digital detox events became more popular, offering people a chance to unplug, to disconnect from the constant buzz of notifications, and to rediscover the joy of being present with one another. Educational systems, too, began to recognize the importance of teaching digital ethics, incorporating lessons on the social, ethical, and psychological impact of technology. Future generations were being equipped not only with the technical skills needed to thrive in a digital world, but with the wisdom to navigate it responsibly. Meanwhile, innovators were hard at work, developing technologies that could help people regain control of their digital lives. Open-source platforms and decentralized networks began to rise as alternatives to the tech giants that had dominated the digital landscape. These new platforms promised greater transparency, privacy, and autonomy. Instead of having all our data funneled through a handful of powerful corporations, people were now exploring ways to create their own digital spaces, where they could own their data and control their online identities. Blockchain technology, privacy-focused apps, and encrypted communication platforms were all part of this movement to return some semblance of control to the individual. At the same time, governments around the world started to take notice. As the consequences of unchecked technological growth became clearer, lawmakers began drafting and implementing policies designed to protect citizens' rights in the digital realm. The General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR in Europe, for example, was one of the first major attempts to give people more control over their personal data. But the need for regulation was global, not just regional. Across the world, nations started grappling with the complexities of digital rights, with discussions about data privacy, digital surveillance, and online regulation moving from the fringes to the center of political discourse. Balancing innovation with the protection of individual rights had become one of the defining challenges of the age. The tipping point was not just a moment of crisis, it was an opportunity. An opportunity for us to look critically at the world we had created and to make deliberate choices about how we wanted to move forward. It was a chance to transform the digital age from a force that fragmented society into one that could empower individuals and communities. The key was balance. We had to find a way to keep the best aspects of technology, the connectivity, the access to information, the ability to innovate without sacrificing our privacy, our autonomy, or our humanity. As we navigated through this pivotal moment, it became clear that the path forward would not be easy. It would require hard choices, collaboration, and a collective effort to reshape our digital future. But the journey wasn't over. The decisions we made in these formative years, how we approached AI, how we engaged with digital platforms, how we balanced connection with privacy, would ultimately determine the legacy we left for future generations. The struggle for balance was just beginning, but it was also an invitation for transformation. If we could face the challenges head on, if we could work together to forge a digital future that respected our humanity, we could create a world where technology was not just a tool for efficiency or control, but a force for good. The choices we made would shape not only our lives, but the future of human connection in an increasingly digital world. The tipping point was not an end. It was a beginning of a new era where we could decide how we wanted to live with technology, how we wanted to use it, and how we wanted to shape it. And as we stood at this crossroads, the question was clear. Would we embrace the opportunity for transformation, or would we surrender to the forces that threatened to redefine what it meant to be human in the digital age? The future was ours to shape, and the path we chose would define the world we left behind. As we navigated deeper into the 2022, one of the most striking realizations that began to emerge was the profound paradox at the heart of our hyper-connected world. The more connected we became, the more exposed we were. We lived in a time when every click, every swipe, every online interaction was tracked, analyzed, and sometimes even sold. The very tools designed to make our lives easier were also slowly chipping away at one of our most fundamental rights: privacy. It felt like an unspoken bargain: free services, convenience, and instant gratification in exchange for an increasingly open window into our lives. The idea that our personal data could be so easily accessed, often without our full awareness or consent, was becoming a hard pill to swallow. The digital ecosystem we had willingly entered had become a vast web of information gathering. Social media platforms, e-commerce sites, even news outlets tracked our every move. Every time we liked a post, shared a photo, or added a product to our cart, our preferences, habits, and opinions were being logged and stored in invisible databases. The extent to which this data was being used, often without our knowledge, was staggering. From advertising targeting to the way companies personalized our online experience, our digital footprints were being analyzed and profiled to such a degree that it seemed as though the companies we interacted with knew us better than we knew ourselves. The lines between service and surveillance were becoming dangerously thin, and the once innocent act of scrolling through a social media feed now felt like walking through an invisible minefield of algorithms. Yet, this exposure was not just an abstract threat. It was a tangible reality. The convenience of personalized experiences, the suggestions that seemed to know exactly what we wanted before we even asked, was intoxicating. It was a world where our smartphones, smart speakers, and every other connected device were eagerly anticipating our needs, shaping our world around us with uncanny precision. At first, it seemed like magic, a seamless interaction between man and machine. But as we became more reliant on these technologies, the feeling of being watched, of being cataloged and profiled, began to feel less like magic and more like a trap. The paradox was impossible to ignore. We had created a digital world that connected us in ways we had never imagined, but in doing so, we had exposed ourselves to an unprecedented level of surveillance. The more convenient our lives became, the more vulnerable we seemed. It wasn't just about convenience anymore, it was about control. Who controlled our data? Who controlled the information that shaped our experiences, our thoughts, even our identities? The answers were becoming increasingly murky. As AI and machine learning technologies advanced, our data became not just a snapshot of who we were, but a predictive model of who we might become. Algorithms learned from our behavior, shaping what we saw, what we bought, and even what we believed. In the pursuit of efficiency, we had sacrificed something fundamental: our privacy. Despite this, there was a growing sense of awareness and, with it, a surge of action. People began to understand the depth of the issue, and the conversation around privacy shifted from a niche concern to a global dialogue. It was clear that the digital world was evolving faster than any of us had anticipated, and with it, the need for better privacy protections became more urgent. Governments, tech companies, and individuals were all starting to acknowledge the fragility of the status quo. The question was no longer whether privacy mattered, it was whether we could regain what had already been lost. Governments around the world began to take action, though the responses were varied and often inconsistent. The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, was one of the first major steps towards strengthening data protection, setting stringent rules for how companies could handle personal data. Other countries, spurred by public outcry and mounting pressure from civil society, began to follow suit. While these regulations were a step in the right direction, they often felt like a reactive measure, an attempt to catch up with a fast-moving digital landscape. The question remained, could we truly regain the privacy we had lost? Or had the digital age passed a point of no return, where our personal information was now too valuable to be protected in any meaningful way? Despite the challenges, there was hope. A growing movement, fueled by a collective desire to reclaim control over personal data, began to take shape. People started to demand more transparency from tech companies, urging them to adopt privacy by design principles, where privacy features were integrated into the very architecture of products and services. This shift was not just a response to consumer demand, but also a strategic move by companies that recognized the importance of building trust. Privacy had become a competitive edge, and companies were beginning to realize that respecting users' privacy wasn't just the right thing to do. It was essential for their long-term survival in a marketplace that was becoming increasingly distrustful of data practices. In the tech world, new solutions began to emerge to address the privacy paradox. Decentralized networks and blockchain technologies offered promising avenues for individuals to regain control of their digital footprints. These technologies provided a way for people to own and control their data, allowing them to decide what information to share and with whom. Decentralized platforms, which operated without a central authority, were gaining traction as viable alternatives to the monolithic tech giants that had dominated the internet for so long. Blockchain, with its transparent, secure, and immutable record-keeping, offered a new way to protect data from unauthorized access and manipulation. These technologies weren't just theoretical ideas. They were becoming real, tangible tools that could empower individuals to reclaim their privacy and autonomy in the digital world. But technology alone was not enough. The battle for privacy was also a cultural shift, a movement toward digital literacy that was gaining momentum. People needed to understand the mechanics of data collection, the implications of their digital actions, and the steps they could take to protect themselves. Educational initiatives focused on digital ethics, data protection, and privacy rights began to play an increasingly important role. Schools and universities started incorporating courses on digital citizenship, teaching students not only how to navigate the internet, but how to protect their digital identities. As individuals became more aware of the risks they faced online, they started to take proactive steps to safeguard their privacy. They began using encryption tools, opting for private search engines, and becoming more selective about the data they shared with tech companies. It was an awakening, a growing realization that privacy, once taken for granted, was something that needed to be fought for in the digital age. The awareness surrounding privacy was also prompting changes within tech companies themselves. As consumer demand for better privacy protections grew, companies started investing more in secure systems and transparent data practices. Many began offering tools that allowed users to manage their privacy settings more effectively, giving them greater control over what information was shared and with whom. The rise of privacy-conscious products, from encrypted messaging apps to VPN services, signaled a shift toward a more user-centric approach to technology. It was no longer enough for companies to simply offer a free service. They had to prove that they valued and respected their users' privacy. At the same time, governments around the world were beginning to recognize that data protection was no longer just a regulatory issue, it was a human rights issue. The pressure to pass stronger privacy laws was mounting, and as the conversation around digital rights continued to evolve, more countries were taking steps to address the growing concerns about surveillance, data breaches, and privacy violations. As global tensions around data privacy escalated, international cooperation became essential. Privacy was no longer a matter of national borders. It was a global concern that required collective action. And yet, for all the progress that was being made, the question remained: could we ever fully reclaim the privacy we had lost? Could we reverse the tide of data collection and surveillance that had become so deeply entrenched in our digital lives? The answer, perhaps, was not simple. It wasn't about going back to a time before the internet, but about creating a future where the digital landscape could evolve in a way that respected individual privacy while still fostering innovation and connection. As we moved further into the 2022, the struggle to balance privacy with connectivity became more urgent. The privacy paradox was not just a theoretical dilemma. It was a living, breathing issue that affected every aspect of our daily lives. The choices we made, both as individuals and as a society, would determine the course of the digital age. Would we continue to trade our privacy for convenience, or would we find a way to protect our most personal information while still enjoying the benefits of a connected world? It was a question that didn't have easy answers, but it was a question that needed to be asked. The journey toward reclaiming privacy was only just beginning, but it was a journey that would shape the digital future for generations to come. In the 2022, as technology continued to advance at a staggering pace, it became increasingly clear that the benefits it promised weren't being distributed evenly across the globe. While the digital revolution had transformed many aspects of life for those with access, revolutionizing education, healthcare, business, and social interaction, it also deepened the divide between those who had access to these advancements and those who did not. The world had become more connected than ever before. Yet in this connected world, a significant portion of the population was still left behind. The digital divide, once an abstract concept discussed in policy papers and think tanks, had become a glaring reality. The more society embraced smartphones, high-speed internet, and smart technologies, the more the gap widened between the haves and the have-nots. For many in rural areas, low-income neighborhoods, and developing countries, the promise of a connected world seemed increasingly out of reach. These individuals and communities, already facing economic and social challenges, now found themselves without the basic tools to fully participate in the modern world. Access to the internet had become a prerequisite for almost everything, from education to job applications, from healthcare consultations to socializing. Those without access were left to watch as the rest of the world sped ahead, leaving them further marginalized. The growing inequality, though primarily economic, had clear digital consequences. Children in low-income areas struggled to complete homework assignments that required a computer or internet access. Adults seeking to improve their job prospects found that applying for positions, attending interviews, or even acquiring new skills had all moved online. Remote work, once a luxury, had become the new norm. But for those without reliable internet, the transition was a harsh reminder of the gap between the connected few and the disconnected many. The healthcare system, too, began to hinge on access to technology, as telemedicine, which had blossomed in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, became an essential lifeline. Yet in rural areas or low-income neighborhoods, the digital tools required to access medical consultations, mental health services, or even basic health information were often beyond reach. This digital inequality was a harsh reality for millions of people who found themselves struggling to keep pace with a rapidly digitizing world. The divide wasn't just about access to information, it was about survival in a world where the digital landscape was becoming as essential as electricity and running water. Education, employment, healthcare, and even social connections were increasingly mediated by technology, and those without the means to connect were being left behind. What good was a connected world if it left so many disconnected, unable to participate fully in the opportunities that it promised? The question of digital inequality had become a pressing issue, one that was impossible to ignore as the world continued its march into the digital age. Governments, organizations, and tech companies had begun to acknowledge the problem, but the solutions remained elusive. Investments in bridging the digital divide were being made, but the gap was still vast. Affordable internet access, reliable devices, and digital literacy were all necessary components of a solution, but they required significant resources and coordination. What could be done to ensure that technology didn't just benefit the privileged few, but serve to uplift the entire global population? Could the digital world be truly inclusive, or would it continue to perpetuate a system where those with access to technology thrived, while those without were left in the dust? Some progress was being made. However, as innovative solutions began to emerge in response to this challenge, in many parts of the world, community-driven initiatives were gaining traction. Local efforts were focused on creating networks that allowed people to share internet access, and groups were providing digital literacy training to those who had been excluded from the digital world. These grassroots movements, often started by nonprofits, local governments, or tech volunteers, were working to ensure that people in underserved communities could learn how to use technology effectively. This wasn't just about providing access to the internet, it was about teaching people how to navigate it, how to protect their privacy, and how to use it to improve their lives. Meanwhile, companies were beginning to realize that their efforts to provide more affordable technology were not just a moral obligation, but also a smart business move. As the digital economy expanded, so too did the demand for a broader customer base. Programs designed to donate refurbished devices to low-income households or to offer subsidized internet plans were slowly gaining ground. These initiatives were making a difference, albeit small, in bridging the gap between the haves and the have-nots. It wasn't a perfect solution, and it certainly wasn't happening fast enough, but it was a step toward ensuring that no one was left behind. In education, teachers were becoming pioneers in integrating technology into classrooms, even in areas with limited resources. Many schools, faced with dwindling budgets and outdated equipment, were turning to open-source software and offline educational tools to provide students with a quality education that could compete with the best schools in wealthier areas. These creative approaches were not only about ensuring that students had access to the tools they needed, but about teaching them how to think critically about the digital world. Students were learning to use technology as a tool for empowerment rather than as a barrier. Healthcare providers, too, were adapting to the new digital reality. Telemedicine, which had become essential during the pandemic, was helping to reach patients in remote areas who had previously been cut off from medical care. Doctors and nurses were using smartphones and low-cost video conferencing tools to provide consultations, offer medical advice, and follow up with patients who couldn't make it to a clinic. While there were still significant hurdles to overcome, such as internet connectivity and the lack of healthcare infrastructure in some regions, telemedicine was undeniably making healthcare more accessible to those who had traditionally been underserved. In addition, governments were slowly beginning to recognize the need to invest in infrastructure. Expanding broadband access to rural and remote areas where internet penetration was still patchy had become a major policy priority for many countries. The promise of universal internet access was gaining traction, with some nations even exploring ambitious projects to provide free or low-cost internet to their citizens, particularly in underserved areas. But this wasn't just about technology, it was about policy and planning. The infrastructure needed to support widespread internet access, fiber optic networks, wireless towers, and satellite internet required significant investment, and there was no quick fix. The real challenge, however, lay not just in connecting people to the internet, but in ensuring that they could participate meaningfully in the digital world once they were connected. The fight for digital equality wasn't just about access to technology, it was about building an inclusive digital culture, one where people weren't just consumers of information but active participants. This required not just infrastructure, but an overhaul in the way digital literacy was taught, how data privacy was protected, and how people could engage in a world where their personal information could so easily be exploited. As the 2020 seconds wore on, it became clear that the journey toward digital equality was not going to be a simple one. There were no quick fixes, no easy solutions. The digital divide wasn't just a technical problem, it was a deeply human one. It required collaboration, innovation, and an unwavering commitment to ensuring that technology worked for everyone. The digital divide wasn't just about access to technology, it was about access to opportunity. It was about ensuring that, as the world continued to connect more deeply and rapidly, no one was left behind. The goal was to transform the digital divide into a digital bridge, one that connected communities and helped foster a global society where everyone, regardless of their background, could thrive in the digital age. This journey, though long and difficult, was about building a future where technology could empower everyone, from the rural farmer in the developing world to the student in a low-income neighborhood, to participate in the promise of a connected world. The challenge was immense, but the potential was even greater, and the time to act was now. Looking ahead into the future, the promise of a connected world is more electrifying than ever. We stand on the cusp of an era defined by extraordinary technological advancements, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, quantum computing, each poised to deepen our connections with one another and immerse us in experiences that once seemed like science fiction. With AI systems becoming more intuitive and capable, virtual reality offering simulations so lifelike that physical space and time feel irrelevant, and quantum computing holding the potential to solve problems previously beyond our grasp, the future seems boundless. Imagine a world where distance is no longer an obstacle, where physical barriers vanish, and where we can meet, collaborate, and share experiences with anyone, anywhere, in ways that feel as natural as face-to-face interaction. It's a tantalizing vision, one that promises to enhance human interaction and elevate our understanding of the world. In this future, communication, collaboration, and creativity could become limitless. We might sit in a virtual room with someone across the globe, share ideas as if we were physically present, and experience the world through the eyes of others in ways that transcend cultural and geographical divides. The possibilities are nothing short of breathtaking, creating a new paradigm where technology doesn't just connect us, it makes the world feel smaller, more intimate, and more interconnected. But as with any leap forward, this new era also brings with it profound questions about where we are headed, what kind of world we want to build, and the ethical implications of such rapid innovation. The promise of a digital utopia where technology serves humanity is incredibly appealing. It's a world where machines and humans work together harmoniously, where innovation fuels progress and enhances our well-being. But the reality of emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, for example, brings with it complexities that we can't yet fully comprehend. As AI systems become more integrated into every facet of our lives, they raise questions about control, autonomy, and decision-making. How much influence should AI have over our lives? Should it shape our decisions, or should it remain a tool at our disposal? The potential for this digital future to create a utopia is undeniable, but so are the risks. As technology evolves at an accelerating pace, we find ourselves facing new challenges, social, ethical, and even existential. Could the very innovations we celebrate one day push the boundaries of what's acceptable? Could the tools designed to empower us instead become mechanisms of control or exclusion? Will we be able to preserve our humanity in a world where the line between digital and physical becomes increasingly indistinct? We are standing at a crossroads. The decisions we make today as individuals, communities, and societies will shape the trajectory of this next chapter. This is the critical moment where innovation intersects with responsibility. How we navigate the digital future, how we embrace technological advancements while addressing the ethical, social, and cultural challenges they bring, will define the kind of world we will inhabit. It is not enough to simply marvel at the technological feats we can accomplish. We must also question whether these advancements align with the values we hold dear, values such as privacy, fairness, and respect for human dignity. As we look toward the digital future, one thing becomes clear. The possibilities are endless, but with these possibilities comes great responsibility. The connected world of tomorrow offers the potential for unprecedented innovation. But to truly capitalize on these opportunities, we must be prepared to navigate the challenges ahead. Will we rise to the occasion and harness the power of technology to build a society that is not only smarter but also more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable? Or will we find ourselves overwhelmed by the very advancements we have unleashed? Education will be a cornerstone in this journey. The digital future demands not just technical skills, but also the critical thinking and ethical frameworks that will guide the decisions of the next generation. Schools, universities, and other educational institutions will play an essential role in preparing young minds for a world where technology is omnipresent and ever evolving. But it's not just about coding or learning how to use the latest software. It's about teaching students how to think critically about technology's impact on society, how to navigate the ethical dilemmas that will arise, and how to use these tools to improve the world around them. We must ensure that future generations understand not only how to use technology, but also how to question it, challenge it, and ensure that it serves humanity rather than the other way around. Equally important is the need for diversity in the development of technology. As we push the boundaries of what is possible, it's essential that we don't fall into the trap of designing technology that reflects only a narrow perspective. Technology must be built by and for a diverse range of people, different backgrounds, cultures, genders, and experiences. Only through inclusion can we ensure that the technologies we create serve the needs of the many rather than the few. If we are to avoid creating a world where the digital divide only deepens, we must make a concerted effort to include diverse voices in the conversation and in the development of these transformative technologies. Furthermore, regulations and policies will play a pivotal role in shaping the digital landscape. The rapid pace of technological advancement often outstrips the ability of governments to regulate it. As new technologies emerge, the ethical and legal frameworks that govern them must evolve alongside them. Thoughtful governance, guided by a commitment to the greater good, will help mitigate risks, address potential abuses, and ensure that the benefits of technology are distributed fairly. Policies that promote digital literacy, protect privacy, and foster innovation are essential. But these policies must be global in scope, because the challenges posed by new technologies transcend borders. International collaboration will be key to ensuring that these innovations benefit all of humanity, rather than a select few. As we venture into this new era of technology, it's clear that collaboration will be the key to overcoming the challenges that lie ahead. No single country, company, or individual can tackle the global issues we face alone. Whether it's combating climate change, addressing global health crises, or improving education, the future will require collective effort. By sharing knowledge and resources across borders and disciplines, we can address these challenges more effectively and create a digital future that benefits everyone, not just those with access to the latest technologies. At the same time, it's crucial that we never lose sight of the human element in all of this. Technology, when used properly, has the power to elevate the human experience, to bring us closer together and to foster understanding. But if we are to create a future where technology serves as a bridge rather than a divide, we must ensure that the values of empathy, cooperation, and foresight guide our decisions. As we look ahead, it's not enough to focus solely on the technical feats we can achieve. We must also consider how these technologies will affect the world we live in, the relationships we build, the communities we form, and the planet we inhabit. The future is coming, and it promises to be unlike anything we've experienced before. As we stand on the brink of unprecedented technological transformation, the stakes have never been higher. Will we rise to the challenge? Will we harness the power of innovation to create a world where technology enhances our humanity rather than diminishes it? As we step into this brave new world, we must do so with eyes wide open, ready to confront the challenges that lie ahead, and eager to unlock the fullest potential of what it means to be human in the digital age. The choice is ours. The future is ours to shape, and it starts with the decisions we make today. Conclusion: the power of connection. Looking back, moving forward. As we reflect on the past 40 years, we see how far we've come. From the first email to the rise of AI, the world has become more connected than ever before. We've embraced technology, often with open arms, but we've also experienced the complexities and consequences that come with it. The balance between connection and privacy, between convenience and humanity, is delicate, and it's one we must continue to navigate carefully. But the journey is far from over. The next chapter of the connected world is just beginning. How we shape that future depends on the decisions we make now, both as individuals and as a society. Will we create a world where technology enhances our humanity, or will we lose ourselves in the very tools we've created to connect? As we move forward, the key will be to remember what connection truly means. It's not just about being online or sharing everything with the world. It's about meaningful connections, ones that honor our shared humanity, our privacy, and our values. The choices we make today will determine how the connected world evolves in the years to come. If you've enjoyed this journey through the connected world, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the future of technology and connection? How do you think we can strike the right balance between connection and privacy in the years ahead? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe to stay updated on future stories. Together, let's continue the conversation about how we can shape the future of our connected world.